miles from the top of Florida to the bottom along I-95. The tropical storm force winds in this hurricane, 70 miles across. So as it comes this way, and as Allison just told us, there's really no question, 100% probability based on the models that this is the path it's going to take and hit Miami, the southern part of Florida here, and most likely based on the models, continue up this way, big enough to swallow the state of Florida, both long ways and at the width of the state. Truly an incredible fact there. Allison, storm surge, we talked to the Florida governor. He talks about 12 feet of storm surge. I mean, that's just an incredible, as you said earlier, that's an entire story of a building. That's the height of your house. How far across the state are those kinds of numbers going to be a danger?
Okay, so it's going to start in the southern half of the region. Again, we expect the track to take it from the southern point all the way to the north. So when we talk about the storm surge, your higher amounts are going to be further south, okay? Now, when we're talking about, say, Key West and into Miami, this is where we are going to talk about that storm surge being up around that 10-foot range. So again, here you can see Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, down to Key West. That's the 5 to 10-foot range. Naples, down towards Key West, this is actually going to be 6 to 12 feet. Now, this may be surprising, Jim, because typically when we talk about the strongest section of the storm, we talk about the northeast quadrant. Think of a clock, the numbers 12 to 3. That would be your strongest point. But for storm surge, it's a little different in this case because of the drop-off. On the eastern side of Florida, the drop-off is pretty steep down into the ocean, where on the western side of the state, it's much more gradual. And so that storm surge can allow to come in at much higher totals than it would on the eastern side. So again, it really doesn't matter, Jim, whether you're on the eastern side of the state or the western side of the state, we are still going to be looking at pretty substantial storm surge amounts for both sides.
No question, Allison, thanks very much. And I know we told you last week how big Harvey was as it came to Texas. It was big, but Irma is bigger, much bigger, historically bigger. And as Irma closes in on Florida, I want you to listen to an urgent message tweeted by some Miami Beach firefighters today. Here is the warning that they sent out.
Please, our primary concern right now is that you evacuate Miami Beach, but we will be here for you after the storm.
CNN's Kyung La joins me now live. She is in Miami Beach. Kyung, authorities really want to make it clear. I mean, they couldn't be clearer. Get out now, because the fact is when this storm hits, they can't help you.
Yeah, you're essentially on your own. The Miami Beach Police Department saying that emergency services will stop once winds reach 39 miles per hour. When you think about all those numbers you were just talking about, that's really nothing. The message from them, get out today. Hurricane Irma now careening towards Florida, expected to make landfall over the weekend.
The roof is about to come. Yep, there it is.
Leaving catastrophic damage and a rising death toll throughout the Caribbean in its wake.
This storm is wider than our entire state and is expected to cause major and life-threatening impacts from coast to coast.
Residents in Miami-Dade County waiting in long lines for shelters and boarding up their properties, filling sandbags to help protect against the expected 3 to 10-foot storm surges. Despite mandatory evacuations, some saying they will hunker down and wait it out.
Do not put yourself or your family at risk. If you've been ordered to evacuate and are still home, please go to a shelter.
But as millions of Floridians do try to escape the storm's path, airports and roads are jammed.
Got boarding passes and everything, and no calls back. You get here, and the plane's been canceled.
Airlines increased flights to Miami and other nearby airports to help with demand, but many airlines' last outbound flights are scheduled today. And the mass exodus from South Florida, potentially one of the largest evacuations in U.S. history, is causing heavy traffic on interstates and long lines at gas stations, with police escorting gas trucks to refill empty pumps.
Now I'm taking this seriously because I realize that it's twice the size of Andrew. It's too much not to, put my family at risk.
Florida isn't the only state making preparations. Georgia and the Carolinas have declared states of emergency, with mandatory evacuations in Georgia along the coast starting Saturday.
This is a complex forecast. Anybody from Alabama to North Carolina should be watching this storm very closely.
Okay.
Back live here in Miami Beach, you're looking at one of the biggest concerns here, the storm surge. They've had an infrastructure explosion, a population growth since Hurricane Andrew. The Miami Beach police reminding people here that this is an area that floods people who die in a hurricane die by drowning from the storm surge. Jim?
The danger is very, very real. Kyung La in Miami Beach, thanks very much. Joining me now on the telephone is Florida Governor Rick Scott. Governor Scott, your state is facing a lot today and in coming days. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for helping get the message out that if you're in an evacuation zone, you've got to get out. I mean, just think about it. We love our families. I love my family. I want to keep my family safe. Everybody's got to focus on keeping their family safe. So if you're in an evacuation zone in Florida, you need to get out now. If you're in the southern part of the state, you need to make sure you're off the roads. If you need to start your evacuation before midnight, you need to be off the roads because this storm is coming. It's not days away. It's hours away now.
You've been getting briefed regularly by your emergency managers. I know you just had a briefing within the last hour. What are they telling you are the worst case scenarios on the coast, both on the Atlantic side and the Gulf side?
Here's what's different. Everybody remembers a little bit about Andrew. I went through Andrew when I was in business, and I had to evacuate some of my hospital. Andrew was not a storm surge storm. This is a massive storm. This is bigger than our state. It goes coast to coast. It could hit more one coast to the other right now because it's still moving a little bit. The winds are going to be 150 miles per hour plus, but we're going to see possibly as much as 12 feet. 12 feet. Think about that. That's above your house. That's above your first floor. 12 feet of storm surge. And what happens when the storm surge comes in, it rushes in, and then it goes back out. You can't survive. It's very difficult to survive 12 feet of storm surge. And so, but even 6 feet is life-threatening. So that's what's different with this one. We're going to see storm surge, so far we know, in the southern part of the state. And so you have got to evacuate. If you're in an evacuation zone, you have got to get out.
Let me ask you this, because you mentioned that the storm is as wider than the state. Where is safe for people to evacuate to? Is there any place truly safe in Florida from the fury of this storm?
Well, the biggest risk we feel right now is the storm surge. So if you're out of the evacuation zone and you go to a shelter, we have shelters all over the state. We're opening shelters in all the impacted counties, other than, of course, the Keys, Monroe County, where we've evacuated everyone. Go to a storm shelter. You've got security there. We know the buildings are safe. You've got food. You've got water. So go to a shelter or go to a friend's house. But if you get away from the storm surge and you get away from the areas that might flood because of 10 to 12 inches of rain, then we believe that you're going to be safe. But we're going to keep you informed. We're going to do everything we can to get you out of harm's way. We're still fighting to get more fuel in the state so people can evacuate. I've done law enforcement escorts to the carriers to get more fuel here. We're getting some more fuel from the Panhandle down to Central Florida. If you can go to FL511.com and look at our highway system. You can go to Gas Buddy, their app, to see where the gas is. So we're fighting to make sure we have enough fuel so everybody can evacuate. But we will get you out, but you can't wait.
I know it's difficult to predict, but when you get briefed by your emergency managers, what do they predict is the worst case scenario for Florida as it gets hit by this storm in terms of damage, extent of damage, number of homes damaged or destroyed?
Well, clearly, if you look at the number of homes, it will clearly be the areas that are more populated. But both coasts, they're worried about the storm surge. The biggest concern I have is the storm surge. And we also have Lake Okeechobee, and we evacuated the communities just south of there because the Corps of Engineers has said the lake is not going to be compromised, but we might get some spillage of water over the lake because of the wind and the amount of rain. So I'm focused on every county. I've talked to sheriffs, I've talked to mayors, I've talked to county commissioners, emergency management individuals all over the state. We do constant calls. My next call with all emergency managers is 5:15, and we'll go through what do you need. I'm getting calls from mayors about shelters, from all sorts of things, but we just keep solving any need anybody has. That's my job. I want everybody in the state to be safe.
Governor Scott, I've heard your heartfelt pleas today. I know that this is something very personal for you. We are watching closely. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Jim. And and thanks for helping get the message out.
Thank you. You heard Governor Scott there in Florida talk about the danger to his state from storm surge. That's what really keeps him up at night, and I'm going to show you why that is. This is a map of the storm surge hazard area, the danger area, in the event that a Category 4 hurricane hits Florida. And that is what the prediction is, that when in the next 24 hours it comes up the southern part of Florida here, it's going to be Category 4. These areas here in red, that is a risk of a storm surge of 9 feet. That's 3 feet taller than me, about the height of your home or 1 story of a building. All along here, now this is mostly the Everglades, but you get up to populated areas here, including Tampa and St. Petersburg. That's why these areas are calling for mandatory evacuations. That's why here in Tampa, U.S. Central Command, that's the headquarters of the U.S. military. That's where the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are run out of. 4,000 to 5,000 service members there, they were evacuated as well. That's a measure of the real risk. You can also see as you come down here, Miami, extremely populated areas, the storm surge expected to be 3 to 6 feet. Still an immense danger going up to West Palm Beach as well. Many of these areas under mandatory evacuation. Take a look at the Florida Keys, because some of the greatest danger there, again, the color red, that's talking about a storm surge of 9 feet or greater. There's no margin for error out there. You get a 1 foot of storm surge, you're underwater. So we're talking about immense, immense danger. And a reminder, this is for a Category 4 hurricane hitting there. All of the models predict that Irma, when it hits the southern part of Florida, it's going to be Category 4. One of the questions I should remind you, and Allison Chinchar was talking about this before, the strongest part of the storm, it's the northeast end, because the winds, it spins counterclockwise. Depending on where it comes in this band here, that'll show you whether it's the west coast or the east coast that gets hit worse, but all of them are going to get hit. It is really hard to imagine what it would be like to be standing in the middle of the ocean during Hurricane Irma, but that's basically what you're doing if you do stay down in these areas on the Keys. And CNN's Bill Weir, he's made it down to Key West today, the southernmost tip of Florida. Bill, we know that island, it's only 4 miles wide. Its only access to the mainland is via bridges. They're concerned about those bridges. And yet where you are, a lot of people refuse to evacuate. How is that?
That's the Conch Republic, as they are known down here. Fiercely independent, a bit stubborn. Some would say hardy, others would say foolhardy, but Duval Street is a relative ghost town. There are still a few of the never-leavers, the locals who are there. But this place, if you've ever been here on a Friday night, is generally packed. We're across the street from Sloppy Joe's, which Ernest Hemingway used to hang out here. And, of course, he wrote about the sea as a dual nature. La Mar, which is paradise, El Mar, the ocean that can sink your boat and take away your house. And ironically, Hemingway's old house may be the safest spot on Key West once Irma comes ashore.
This is a National Historic Landmark. It is the rock of the island. It's built out of 18-inch blocks of limestone.
So if there is a hurricane bunker, it's Papa's old house.
This is the safest place to be. We're also located at 18 feet above sea level, one of the highest points in all the Florida Keys.
Dave Gonzalez is also taking care of Hemingway's great grandcats, the six-toed cats that are famous at that place right there. But there are also so many other kinds of animals, and of course human life is the main worry. The prison on Block Island, which is just north of Key West, is one of the only real Category 5 structures on this island. They've got 400 prisoners there, most of the sheriff's deputies, and several hundred animals. We'll be riding out Irma, Jim.
You know, I imagine some folks at home are saying, look, it looks perfectly sunny there, but that often happens with storms like this. It is literally the calm before the storm. Bill Weir, stay safe. It's not going to be easy where you are.
Yeah, we're headed north before she blows ashore. We just wanted to check in with these folks and then get to high ground.
Smart move. Bill Weir, thanks very much. Joining me now is the Key West Mayor, Craig Cates. Mayor Cates, thanks for coming on. We know you got a lot to face in your community there in the coming hours and days. I want to ask you this, because there is great concern about those bridges to the mainland, really the Keys' lifeline to the mainland, them being washed out with boats, the only way to escape. How does your community survive this?
Well, we're definitely concerned about the bridges. You're absolutely right. But, Key West, we're fortunate that we do have our own electric generating plant for backup, and we do have a desalination plant that could make water, a certain amount of water, but we don't use it. We use wells out of Florida City and Homestead, but that if we had to, we could do that temporarily. But that being said, that is one of our largest concerns is definitely the bridges. If they get damaged, we got 42 bridges to connect Key West to the mainland, and any one of them could cause a serious problem for us.
Now, Key West is under a mandatory evacuation order, and yet many people are staying behind. In your view, aren't they putting not just themselves but others at risk by staying?
No, absolutely putting others at risk. We've been trying to tell everyone, but some people won't leave. They want to stay here with their homes and their belongings, and I'm sure they will go to high ground or to a strong building to get through the storm, and they want to be the first ones here back at their properties in case they get damaged. So that's something that'll never change, but we have been warning them that the hospital is closed down. There's nobody here to help you. If you get injured, you won't be able to be airlifted out or anything. So if you do stay inside your building, stay inside a safe building. Don't come out in the storm.
Mayor, I know that you and the residents there are tough. They've weathered difficult storms before, but this one is different. I wonder if this time you're concerned that there is the potential damage from this storm that the community cannot recover from.
No, I don't think there's any storm that we can't rebuild from. We'll be back up and running, I'm sure, in a short period of time. I can't say exactly how long until we have the actual impact, but it looks like it's going slightly east of us, and we're going to get, they're forecasting 120 mile-an-hour winds or something, but hopefully we're not going to get the full 155 of the Category 4 storm. And when it comes that direction, the tide surge will come from the bay side, and that's the best chance for us coming from that. It won't build up as high as it could be coming from the ocean. So all those things are kind of working in our favor, and we're keeping hoping that they work out, but we're prepared for the worst. We're locked down. We got our 5 Category 5 buildings where our first responders are, and be ready after the storm to come out and help whoever we can.
Well, Mayor Craig Case, we wish you and the community the very best. Thanks very much. Traffic is bumper to bumper heading north on almost all of Florida's major highways as millions of people try to flee in what is quickly becoming the largest mass hurricane evacuation in U.S. history. But what about the people who cannot leave? Some shelters already at capacity. Please stay with us.
You're right, Jim. At this point, there's so little difference between the models that the track really has come together. So basically what this means for the U.S. is we expect it to end up making landfall, say, around Key Largo or somewhere into the Keys. This would be around sunrise Sunday morning. That's the expected landfall time. And then as we go through the day Sunday into Monday, it continues on its trek further north into the rest of Florida. So again, this is where we expect it to go as it continues to push forward. And as we advance this to kind of show where it ends up going, you'll notice it does weaken pretty quickly. This will actually be really, really good news for the folks who live, say, further north into Florida. Say, by the time we get to, say, just around Tallahassee, Jacksonville level, we're talking winds only about 75 miles per hour. So again, that's going to be good news for the folks that live a little bit further north. But remember, 75 miles per hour is still a Category 1 hurricane. We'll get this into motion so we can talk about where the storm surge is going to be. But right now, the worst of it is expected to be on the south side of Florida. That's where we could be looking at, say, upwards of 10 feet of storm surge. Now, let's take a look at what that actually means for someone whose house is there, okay? When we talk about South Florida having storm surge of 5 to 10 feet, keep in mind, a standard one-story building is 10 feet. So that means the water would actually come all the way up your entire first story of your house, okay?
The scale of this, just incredible. Thanks very much, Allison Chinchar. I want to give you an idea of the physical size of Irma here. You get a sense of it looking at the map. Here's Cuba here. This is the entire breadth of the storm coming up towards Florida. let's get into some of the numbers there. If you look at the center of the storm, about 140 miles across, hurricane winds in that 140-mile zone. 140 miles sounds like a lot. Let's compare it to Florida. This is the I-4 corridor. Goes from Tampa here to the Gulf Coast, to the Atlantic coast. That's just 132 miles. So hurricane force winds here, 140 miles across in Irma, wider than the width of the entire state of Florida. This will get you as well. The entire breadth of the storm, it's about 370 miles with at least tropical storm strength winds. Give you an idea of that compared to the state of Florida. This is I-95 going from the top of the state all the way to the bottom. That's only 352 miles. So hurricane force winds here, 140 miles across in this storm. That is wider than the fat part of the state of Texas. And north to south here, I should say it's actually 382 miles from the top of Florida to the bottom along I-95. The tropical storm force winds in this hurricane, 70 miles across. So as it comes this way, and as Allison just told us, there's really no question, 100% probability based on the models that this is the path it's going to take and hit Miami, the southern part of Florida here, and most likely based on the models, continue up this way, big enough to swallow the state of Florida, both long ways and at the width of the state. Truly an incredible fact there. Allison, storm surge, we talked to the Florida governor. He talks about 12 feet of storm surge. I mean, that's just an incredible, as you said earlier, that's an entire story of a building. That's the height of your house. How far across the state are those kinds of numbers going to be a danger?
Okay, so it's going to start in the southern half of the region. Again, we expect the track to take it from the southern point all the way to the north. So when we talk about the storm surge, your higher amounts are going to be further south, okay? Now, when we're talking about, say, Key West and into Miami, this is where we are going to talk about that storm surge being up around that 10-foot range. So again, here you can see Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, down to Key West. That's the 5 to 10-foot range.
Hurricane Irma
Naples down towards Key West.
Florida.
This is actually going to be 6 to...
flights are getting out before the storm. Just hours earlier, flight trackers showed the hundreds of flights departing Florida, almost all of them headed away, headed north. At one point last night, there was so much air traffic in southern Florida, a ground stop was issued at Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and Orlando airports. Now you can see right now, this is current, there are far fewer planes flying out of Florida. Miami International Airport is supposed to see its last flight, its very last flight, leave in 2 hours. Fort Lauderdale's last flight is before 8 o'clock tonight, and Orlando will start shutting down commercial operations tomorrow at 5 p.m. Authorities desperately trying to make use of this critical last chance period and convince defiant residents to listen to those evacuation orders and to leave now. Message could be much clearer than that. That is police in West Palm Beach today going door to door, in effect there. CNN's Brian Todd is there right now. Brian, Palm Beach County, high concentration of elderly residents there. Are they getting special help to get them out of harm's way?
Well, Jim, they have a special shelter set up for these people to go to. As far as special help, it looks like many of them are going to have to rely on their caregivers for that. There might be some public transportation available for them, but it's kind of scattershot because they've got to get as many people to these shelters as they can. They say they want everybody to get to them, and they want to help everybody and not just have a special emphasis on the elderly, but they do understand that elderly people need special care, and that is a huge worry because some of them don't want to go. Some of them who do are not easy to move. A short time ago, I just talked to a person who runs a small in-home care center. It's a care center for Alzheimer's patients. He's got only 4 people in that care center. It's not much bigger than a small house, and he's moving them from one of his facilities to another, not to one of the special needs shelters. But they do say if you're going to go to a special needs shelter, you got to bring your caregiver with you because they don't have the personnel. Moving all of these elderly people, hundreds of thousands of them who live in Palm Beach County, is a huge task. task. They're doing it as much as they can, but Jim, it is a real struggle. As for the actual physicality of this, you talked about and you showed that video of the cars coming, of the police cars trying to get people out of this street. This is what they're concerned about, the storm surge. It's going to come right here on the Intercoastal Waterway. 5 to 10 feet of storm surge, we're told. Now, this is low tide. We're about 8 feet above the water, but it's going to, at high tide, we're only about 4 to 5 feet. When it's high tide and you get 5 to 10 feet of storm surge plus the wave activity washing over here, this is going to be inundated. That's why those police were going door to door in this neighborhood just now, telling people to evacuate. Over there on Palm Beach, that is another area where they're trying to get people out of. The mandatory evacuation has been in place since this morning. They want people out of there now. They want people off the roads by tomorrow morning, Jim.
Brian Todd, there it is, that storm surge. That is the warning that keeps coming up. Let's move up north now to the city of Davie. That's near Fort Lauderdale, just north of Miami. Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She represents this area. She joins me now. Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, thank you so much. I know you got a lot on your plate now. We got a map here showing where your district is. She represents this area. Is in mandatory evacuation areas. Are you finding that people are heeding those calls?
Yes, for the most part, we have folks who are really paying attention, listening to the instructions, following them. The folks in the mandatory evacuation zones, for the most part, we've seen them actually leaving over the last couple of days. But it is a very important message to send to those folks who have been deciding to stay. It is absolutely critical that you leave if you're in a mandatory evacuation zone. That's east of US 1 in Broward County. Broward County is in the crosshairs of a direct hit of this very powerful storm. It is bigger than any storm, even than Andrew, 25 years ago, that we've seen. And Jim, also, it's important to note we have 1,000 people move to Florida a day. There are many, many people in our community who have never lived through a hurricane and who need to be heeding these instructions. I went door to door in neighborhoods in my district yesterday, just west of the mandatory evacuation zone. People are preparing, but we also have vulnerable people who need help. So we're asking people to look out for their neighbors as well as for themselves.
As I'm speaking to you, I'm showing a map here that shows the storm surge hazard areas. And just pointing down here, this is where Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz represents. And you're seeing a predicted storm surge, or at least danger, 3 to 6 feet, perhaps higher. What would that kind of storm surge do to the communities that you represent there?
We already have very significant flooding problems on the east side in our communities in Hollywood and Hallandale Beach and Dania Beach. And let me tell you, that kind of storm surge will be devastating. There will be a tremendous amount of devastating impact. And so it's important for people to leave. The aftermath and the cleanup of from this storm is going to be the likes of which we've never seen. I've just come from a shelter on the west side of my district, if you still have the map. And, we have an inland. I represent a district that goes from the sawgrass to the seagrass. On the sawgrass side of the district, because Irma is likely to also go over the Everglades, where we have warm waters there.
Now, this may be surprising, Jim, because typically when we talk about the strongest section of the storm, we talk about the northeast quadrant. Think of a clock, the numbers 12 to 3. That would be your strongest point. But for storm surge, it's a little different in this case because of the drop-off. On the eastern side of Florida, the drop-off is pretty steep down into the ocean, where on the western side of the state, it's much more gradual. And so that storm surge can allow to come in at much higher totals than it would on the eastern side. So again, it really doesn't matter, Jim, whether you're on the eastern side of the state or the western side of the state.
Do we need to change the way we talk about these so-called
once-in-a-lifetime
storms? The flooding Hurricane Harvey left behind in Houston was deadly and devastating. Entire neighborhoods were submerged after rainfall totals exceeded 500-year levels. But as it turns out, these flooding events are not quite so rare. This was the third storm in just 3 years to bring so-called 500-year rain to the city.
Clearly, we're seeing extreme events. Who would have imagined 52 inches in Houston? It's just unimaginable.
The U.S. has experienced at least 24 of these 500-year rain events since 2010, including Hurricane Matthew in 2016. The 500-year term is a risk assessment tool used for flood insurance, but scientists say the phrase is misleading. It actually does not mean that the event happens only once every 500 years, but instead that there is a 1 in 500 chance This amount of flooding will occur in a single year. A 100-year event has a 1 in 100 chance of occurring. Researchers say these large storms are happening more often.
As the climate continues to warm, rare events could even become the norm.
Michael Wayner studies the behavior of extreme weather events. He says global temperatures have increased a full degree centigrade in the past century, and those warmer conditions can create more powerful storms.
Warmer air can contain more moisture than colder air.
And more water in the air means more rain that can fall in flood zones where populations are growing.
Look in a place like Miami or Houston, and in the past decades we've had incredible developments. As we're planning and looking forward, we have to make room for where this water is going to go.
Driving around Charleston, we're starting to see gasoline become in short supply. We've seen people cleaning out bottled water and bread at grocery stores. The state's governor here in South Carolina is weighing whether or not to order evacuations from low-lying flood-prone areas like Charleston. That decision would be expected sometime today.
Florida has more than 1,300 miles of coastline, and that leaves millions of people vulnerable to the surge of seawater of a hurricane just like Irma that can potentially unleash. And Jeff Glor actually got a bird's eye view of that exact threat.
Veteran helicopter pilot Paul Barth took us on a tour of the Miami coastline that's under the threat of dangerous storm surge.
This is the most low-lying, most vulnerable area of Miami. The South Miami right here.
And the governor said today that there are no plans to do that, that those southbound lanes are actually needed for emergency personnel and getting gas to the areas that need it the most. Now, I want to show you one other thing really quickly. Take a look here. This is the rest area that we're talking about. You can see that it's actually a Florida Highway Patrol trooper here, just rushed in, ran over to something. We're going to go check and see what that is all about. But I will tell you that troopers are all along this area to try to help make this transition for folks a lot smooth, more smooth than it as smoothly as it can be, I should say. And I will tell you that they're glad to see so much traffic out here. That means people are listening to these warnings. Now, for you at home, if you are still contemplating leaving and getting on the road, it's okay, but you need to be very careful. Go to FL511.com. That'll tell you some of the areas that are congested the most, maybe help you navigate the routes. But just a heads up, it's all very, very busy. All very, very busy. So just be very patient as you head out there. Josh, back to you.
All right, Rod, thank you for that update. Pack your patience for sure. We appreciate it.
And in Polk County, officials have issued a voluntary evacuation for some residents. They're strongly urging people who live in mobile homes and flood-prone areas to evacuate. Now, we found some residents in the Meadowbrook Mobile Home Park in Lakeland who are evacuating. The mobile home park flooded badly just weeks ago when Tropical Storm Emily struck.
I moved down here in February from upstate New York. I mean, my sister from Luke's called and said, Tammy, you got to get out. This isn't snow. I mean, snow, you can shovel. Rain, you can't. Wind, you can't. And God knows what's going to happen to these trailers if the winds get how high. I don't even know that.
It is important to know if you stay that once wind speeds reach 40 to 50 miles an hour, first responders will not be able to come and help you.
Along our coastal communities, storm surge, one of the biggest concerns and the most deadly as Irma draws near. And as we saw with Hurricane Harvey, rising waters can be far more devastating than winds. News Channel 8's John Rogers continues our team coverage now from Sarasota County.
Good evening. Folks who live along coastal Sarasota County are really worried about possible storm surge because for spots like Lido Beach, it doesn't take a lot of water to cause a lot of damage. Residents say in recent years, this beach has suffered from a lot of erosion and can't take much more.
If we get a 4 foot and we get any kind of push on a surge, it's going to be in the parking lot and probably out in the street a little bit.
Depending on Irma's track, Sarasota County emergency officials expect anywhere from 1 to 15 feet of storm surge. They've issued a mandatory evacuation order for coastal communities. So people are battening down the hatches. Store owners on St. Armand's Circle are boarding up. And as boaters work to secure their vessels, condos are putting up large specialized sandbags and barriers to keep the water out. Folks who are staying put are doing as many preparations as they can, and then they're going to wait and see what happens. Reporting on Lido Beach, John Rogers, News Channel 8.
And as more evacuation orders are put into place, more Floridians are taking to the interstate to seek refuge from the storm's path. And now those exhausted travelers are running into another obstacle, trying to find a hotel room or hotels with any openings.
Yes, here is Capitol Bureau correspondent Jake Stofan.
The long line of slow-moving traffic behind me is headed west. Evacuees seeking safety from the path of Hurricane Irma.
Running out
but
to
hotels
evacuate.
are completely
That's the
booked
latest
from
storm track
Tallahassee
show
as far
that the
west
worst
as
case scenario for the state of Florida might actually happen. As governor of Florida, Jeb Bush oversaw the state's response to 8 separate hurricanes in a 2-year period. Governor Bush, thanks very much for taking the time there. We know you have your experience with storms. I'm curious, as you look at this one, how does it compare to the 8 you handled directly in Florida?
Well, we had 2 or 3 Cat 4 storms. This one is bigger, and it's as powerful as any that has hit the, maybe other than Andrew, that's hit the state. But it's the path it's taking is going to impact more people than any storm that in the past. So this is a storm that's going to have hurricane force winds over all the peninsula, and we now have 19 million people living in the state. Everybody can't evacuate in a community like Miami that's so densely populated. Thankfully, we have the best building code in the country, and we have great emergency managers at the local and state level. So we're prepared. One advantage, which is kind of unusual, is that the storm has been so strong for so long that there's been 5 or 6 days to prepare. And I think most Miamians, most Floridians have taken this very seriously.
Governor Bush, what amazes us is when you look at the models right now, they show with really certainty that as this storm goes forward, it's going to go straight up the state. It's going to take a right-hand turn, hit South Florida, and keep going right up the state. These purple areas here that I'm showing our viewers now, that is a virtual guarantee of the path, and then there's a little bit less certainty as you go further up. But Governor, because of that, since it's going to be basically running roughshod over the state from bottom to top, what are you most worried about in terms of damage?
Well, I mean, these are millions of people are going to be in harm's way. So first and foremost, the safety of people that I care for, and I know Governor Scott does, is the first priority. The physical damage is going to be serious for sure. There's some unique risks. Maybe Lake Okeechobee there could be a breach of some kind, but watching the reports, it appears that the Army Corps has strengthened Lake Okeechobee's dike system. But right now, the focus is on making sure people are prepared and getting people to hunker down if they can't safely evacuate.
You responded to many hurricanes, as we said, as governor. What did you and the state learn then that you see Florida doing a better job of now in advance of Irma?
Well, we learned that you couldn't evacuate everybody, and that we needed to have much stronger shelter space. And we passed the most meaningful building code reforms during my time. And so all the new schools have been built are shelter compliant. There's a greater focus on special needs shelters. The state learned a lot during those hurricanes, and I think those lessons have been applied now, both at the local level and at the state level. Governor Scott is really all in on this, and so are the mayors. They understand that this is their chance to really show their heart.
Well, Governor Bush, I know you love your state, and this could be a big challenge, so we wish you and we wish the state of Florida luck.
Thank you. Thanks for covering this story.
Happy to. We'll talk again. We want to go back now to CNN meteorologist Allison Chinchar. She's in the CNN Weather Center. Allison, we know that we're just minutes away from the next key update on Hurricane Irma. What changes do we expect to see in the storm and the storm's path?
We don't expect it to, and I think this is going to be the key, we don't expect to see that much of a drop. The fact of the matter is it's over open water. This is what the storm wants to be. This is where it wants to be. When it's over land, it weakens. When it's over open water, it can either maintain or strengthen. And we expect it to maintain. Winds right now about 155 miles per hour, gusting up to 185 miles per hour. So you have your hurricane warnings in red and your hurricane watches in pink. That takes it a little bit further up into Florida. And it would not surprise me if we we start to get some, say, even in the northern tier of Florida, especially around Tallahassee and Jacksonville, because this is where the track is expected to take it. Now, with that said, we expect landfall to be around a Category 4 strength. By the time it reaches that northern section of Florida, it should weaken back down to a Category 1, but that's still going to have incredibly strong winds. Now, at landfall, again, we're talking Category 4 strength, which is where we are right now. As it pushes over land, it will weaken pretty quickly. Tampa, we could be looking at winds, say, around 100 to 115 miles per hour. And then by the time it actually comes all the way inland, say up towards Atlanta, Georgia, we could be looking at winds, say, around 40 to 50 miles per hour. This is going to be the forecast intensity. When you look at it again, it doesn't matter whether you're on the east side or the west side of Florida, you're going to be dealing with really intense.
At Happy Tails Travel, we ship your pets by air with care to just about anywhere. Moving, relocating, PCS orders, adopting a pet from a different state. What do I do next? This is the most important part of my move. We provide customized pet transportation for your family from start to finish. We get to know you, your pets, and your situation. Every travel need is unique. All you need to get started is to fill out a pet travel form on our website. One of our professional pet travel consultants will be in touch with you soon after to go over your pet travel needs and to provide you with a free estimate. Ready to move forward with your pet relocation? We will send you a contract and begin doing all the research needed for your furry companion's flight. We make sure your pet is current with all necessary vaccinations. Make sure you have all the required documentation to help you fill out needed forms for international travel. Provide you with a timeline for when each step of the relocation process must be completed by. Conduct all the flight research to find the best flight for your pet. Once the flight is booked, we send you a detailed crate shopping list letting you know what kind of crate and accessories are needed for your furry friend's flight. Can't crate or don't want to look for one? No problem. We can purchase one and have it mailed to you if time permits. A few days before the flight, we will mail you a customized pet travel packet which will have all the documents and crate labeling needed to send your pet on their way. We will call you and any other party involved in the pet shipping process so you know exactly where to go and what to do. If you need assistance with your pet's move, we are happy to arrange boarding and transportation for your furry family member as well. We always have your pet's safety and comfort as our foremost priority. At Happy Tails Travel, we ship your pets by air with care. Fill out our pet travel form or give us a call today to share your story and see how Happy Tails Travel can help you and your furry family member move more safely and soundly.
Comparing. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Calling people. Did you hear the latest? What are you doing? That's stirring everybody up. I think everyone needs to take a step back, talk to their family calmly and say, how can we prepare? What do we have in our house now? Because today is Friday. It's supposed to come Sunday. So if you haven't left the state yet, you're most probably not going to leave. So let's be okay with where we are. Let's take a deep breath again. Stop comparing. Stop talking to everyone about it 24/7. Because there's only little that you can do right now.
Okay, how can you manage your anxiety? Because it is high anxiety right now.
Yes, I would say take some deep breaths. Allow yourself to watch something funny on Netflix again. Don't consistently watch everything.
Once you're safe and prepared and ready.
Yes, of course. Once you're safe, prepared, and ready. Absolutely. But allow yourself from downtime, because this is like, I would say, all the patients I have spoken to, my family members, my neighbors, 24/7 for the past week, that's all they're thinking about. Please take a half an hour. Today is Friday. It's not Sunday yet. Right. To watch something funny. Eat a pizza. You know, remember something funny. Look at some family photos. You have to take your mind off of this for a second and really appreciate what you do have.
And I know personally for me, once you've kind of made the list of to-do things, you've checked it off, you kind of just have to know that you've done the best you can, and now it's going to be what it's going to be.
That's it. That's exactly it. There's been all these lists online I was going to go through today. You make sure you have your canned vegetables and fruit, but you know what you need to do. You know what you need to do physically to prepare, and now we're talking about emotions, and I think we all need to breathe and calm down and hug each other and love each other and say we're doing the best we can, but freaking out is not helping us.
Freaking out does not help.
Is not helping us get through this. Be kind and be calm and give each, and you know what, be supportive of our neighbors and stores. We're not going to gouge prices. Let's all come together.
You don't expect to see that much of a drop. The fact of the matter is, it's over open water. This is what the storm wants to be. This is where it wants to be. When it's over land, it weakens. When it's over open water, it can either maintain or strengthen. And we expect it to maintain. Winds right now about 155 miles per hour, gusting up to 185 miles per hour. So you have your hurricane warnings in red and your hurricane watches in pink. That takes it a little bit further up into Florida. And it would not surprise me if we start to get some, say, even in the northern tier of Florida, especially around Tallahassee and Jacksonville, because this is where the track is expected to take it. Now, with that said, we expect landfall to be around a Category 4 strength. By the time it reaches that northern section of Florida, it should weaken back down to a Category 1, but that's still going to have incredibly strong winds. Now, at landfall, again, we're talking Category 4 strength, which is where we are right now. As it pushes over land, it will weaken pretty quickly. Tampa, we could be looking at winds, say, around 100 to 115 miles per hour. And then by the time it actually comes all the way inland, say up towards Atlanta, Georgia, we could be looking at winds, say, around 40 to 50 miles per hour.
You can see with their visible satellite imagery with GOES 16,
when you look at it again, it doesn't matter whether you're on the east side or the west side of Florida.
It's been a well-defined storm now for about a week or so. That's how it's been able to maintain that intensity. So it's still a strong Category 4 storm. And as long as the path holds true where this stays north of Cuba, it will likely maintain that intensity. And then we're waiting for that turn to the north. It's waiting kind of for that break from that area of high pressure we're watching to the east. But, you know, about 20 miles east or west, that can all make differences on the impacts here in the Tampa Bay area. At this point, it looks like it's probably going to make landfall around the tip of Florida or maybe even in southwest Florida and then continue up the center, even maybe a little bit west, up through the state and peninsula of Florida, but weakening as it does so. So by the time it's moving out of the Tampa Bay area into North Florida, probably a Category 1 storm, but still hurricane force winds around this storm and then moving out of our area.
So Florida,
so the good news is at least it does move out quickly. Here's a look at our future radar. You can see using the band.
In South Florida, Ed, I know Florida suspended tolls across the state. One of the steps they've taken to try to ease that traffic along, but how's it look from your vantage point?
Well, we've spent much of the day monitoring these roadways and kind of getting a sense of just how many people here in the most southern part of Florida are heeding those evacuation warnings. It's been interesting. When we drive here, you're looking at the most southern part of Interstate 95 as we pass downtown Miami. And we have driven this interstate from Dade County into Broward County, north into Palm Beach as well. And it has been smooth sailing through here. Now, I don't want to give everybody the wrong impression. Once you get much further north, you apparently do start hitting some of those traffic jams and it slows down considerably. But at least here down in the most southern part of Florida, this is the way we've kind of seen these roads throughout the day. Out in the surface streets, more cars, which gives you the impression that a lot of people are staying here in the Dade County area riding out this storm. Jim?
And that's exactly what many Florida officials have said don't do, and yet they're doing it. Ed Lavandero, thanks very much. The island of Barbuda was decimated by the hurricane with buildings ripped apart, trees uprooted. These are some early pictures from there. If you want an idea of what this storm's going to be like when it hits the state of Florida, this is an early view of its immense power. Our Leila Santiago just returned from Barbuda, where she saw the devastation like you're seeing here firsthand. She's just arrived back safely, thankfully, in Antigua nearby. Leila, we're seeing some of these images now, but I imagine as you walked around there, drove around, just devastation.
Yeah, what you see from above, right, from those aerials, and then kind of what you feel when you're down there are two very overwhelming feelings. I mean, it is pure destruction. It is desolate. People are overwhelmed. You can tell that it's not a, what am I going to do tomorrow? It's a, what am I going to do next hour? I mean, they are overwhelmed, trying to get off of the island, those who are still there. The priority now, not so much to save what Irma did left behind, but more so to save lives. They're trying to get people out. On our way there, we actually saw 5 ferries coming from Barbuda to Antigua. So right now they are bracing for these to come with Hurricane José. And it just was this feeling, you know, Barbuda is such a vibrant island, you know, so colorful, not just in buildings, but culture and people. And then to see it so desolate. It's really overwhelming, and the people with tears in their eyes are just not knowing what to do next, and not knowing what the next storm will actually bring.
They're going to need a lot of help, no question. Our Leila Santiago, one of the first to see the devastation there in Barbuda firsthand. Thanks very much. We are just moments away from the next update on the path for Hurricane Irma. Where will it head next? Stick around.
It's just insane to me that
to be dealing with really intense winds. Now take a look at this, because this just goes to show you there are a lot of high-rise buildings in Florida, not just Miami, but other cities. The higher you go up in those buildings, the stronger the winds actually get. So let's say the winds at the surface are 145 miles per hour, for example. You get into a 30-story building, you're now talking winds jumping to 175 miles per hour. Then you get up to, say, an 80-story building, you could be looking at winds nearing 190 miles per hour. So again, this is going to be a concern for a lot of the high rises that we even have across areas of southern Florida and some of those other regions. Now, the other thing that we wanted to note, again, was we're talking about Jose, because this is going to impact, unfortunately, some of the exact same islands that already had to deal with Irma, now getting Jose again. The good news is, long term, this does not look like it's going to impact the U.S. In fact, actually, once it makes its right-hand turn, the only place it's likely to impact would end up being, say, around Bermuda. Now, one of the things that people have talked about is the comparison of Andrew. This is to scale. I want to point that out. This is Andrew. This is Irma. This is a true scale comparison. When we talk about it, the winds for Andrew were slightly higher. At landfall, about 165. We expect Irma to be around 150. But again, the time over Florida. And this
first to 4 comes back.
This is the key, Jim. Andrew only spent 4 hours over Florida. We expect Irma to spend around 30, and that's likely to end up causing some pretty significant damage, just that point alone.
Amazing how big it is. Looks like the perfect storm. Allison Chinchar, thanks very much.
This storm down to 150. Last hour is 155. Now, Category 5 starts above 157, so that's why there's a number 4 right there. It's a Category 4, but this is not a Category 1. This is still a major hurricane at 150. Let's break this hurricane down, what's going on with the Turks and Caicos. If you live to the north of the eye, you are in what's called the dirty side of the eye. If you live to the south of the eye, you are in a better spot. Why? Because this storm is going 150. It's also moving forward at 16. You have to add those two numbers together if you're on the north or the east side of this eye. You subtract those two numbers if you're on the south side. Now, guess where it's going? Right here. Who's on the dirty side of the eye? Miami. You absolutely are on the worst side as it moves over the Florida Keys. Now let's break down what we go for the rest of the year. We're going to see hurricane warnings all the way up the coast. No question about that. We will see storm surges between, I think, 10 and 15 feet across the Keys, maybe even more into Key Biscayne. There goes the storm. We argued yesterday about how much the Euro and the GFS were apart. Today, they are within 15 miles of each other. This is your final key. This is your final draft of what's going up here right through the center part of the strait. Does it go left or right? Sure, maybe a little bit, but not very much now.
Festive places, particularly this time of year. Let's go to CNN's Chris Cuomo. He is in Miami Beach. Chris, as you know, that beach normally full of people now. Do you find, as you go around the area, that people are finally listening to these evacuation orders?
Yes. The experts, the police will say more than usual, but not enough. There are actually a lot of people on this beach. Just now, the police are starting to come and tell them that they have to get off. This is a mandatory evacuation center, Jim, evacuation zone. So you're not supposed to be here.
Now, we look at the map down there, and of course, Governor Rick Scott told us earlier in the program, it's the storm surge they worry about. He's talking about some areas as much as 12 feet, one story of a house or a building. Where you are, I mean, the thing is, you get storm surge like that, there's no margin for error there. I mean, it's all low-lying, isn't it?
Well, that's the problem. You know, you make a choice to stay, you think you'll be okay, but if that winds up to be a bad choice, now it falls on search and rescue. And even though they have one of the best units in the country here, they get sent all over for catastrophes, they're going to be overwhelmed. So everybody who makes a bad choice puts more strain on the system.
That's the thing. I mean, you know, you're not just making a choice for yourself, you're making a choice for the firefighters, whoever would be, who might have to come come rescue there. As you're there now, you've been talking to some of the local officials, the first responders, etc. Do they give you the sense they're ready for this? I mean, I know they've seen a lot of hurricanes there, but they haven't seen one like this.
Well, that's what they keep saying, is that they're worried that this will be more than they've ever dealt with before. And a downgrade from 5 to 4, as we both know, that's like the difference between a punch in the throat and a punch in the nose. You know, either way, it's going to really hurt. It's really only a distinction for scientists. So they say they've done as much as they can. And especially the first responders here, Jim. You know, a lot of them just came from Harvey, and they're here to defend their homeland, so they're uniquely motivated, but they leave their families, you know, to help the rest of us. And that's a big commitment.
No question. You're going to be sticking out through it there. Have you talked to any residents who are sticking it out, and have they explained to you why they're making that decision?
Yes, you know, and so there's a range. Sometimes it's they're elderly and infirm, they can't leave, or they have other people they have to take care of, or they didn't have the money, they didn't have the access. And then you have people who just say they want to stay, they think they'll be okay. And, you know, look, you can't make them leave, but it is a choice that, as you said very well, Jim, puts others at risk.
Chris Cuomo, stay safe down there. We're glad to have you there, but stay safe. Be sure to tune in this Sunday morning for CNN State of the Union. Jay Tapper, my colleague,
Saturday afternoon, we're finally seeing winds about 50 miles per hour in Miami, then 75. Coral Gables, same story. Cape Coral, same story. Fort Myers, you are now in the hurricane. The white part there, that is the center of the hurricane, just came across probably Isla Morada. I'll get to that in a second. And then right through the center part of the state, everywhere that you see white, you're going to get wind gusts of 100 miles per hour. Orlando, the Villages, Leesburg, all the way up even toward Jacksonville, and the onshore flow pushing water here, making flooding across the East Coast in places that didn't even get an eye. Louis flooding Charleston, Savannah, Jacksonville, just like what happened in Matthew. Let me break this down for you just a little bit better. Here's what's going on right now with the
bigger than the entire state of Florida is bearing down on Florida and could bring catastrophic devastation from one end of the state to the other. It's expected to make a direct impact near Miami. Path of destruction. Hurricane Irma is lashing Cuba and the Bahamas right now after carving a path of destruction across the Caribbean, killing at least 24 people and leaving at least one island reduced to rubble. Last chance. Florida's governor warns that this is the last chance to evacuate or get to shelter. 1 million people have been ordered to leave their homes. Millions more are trying to flee on very crowded highways as emergencies extend up the East Coast through Georgia, the Carolinas to Virginia. And left behind, officials warn that those who won't get out are putting their lives at risk and will be on their own once the storm hits. Rescuers will not be able to answer calls for help. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, the latest forecast is just coming in for Hurricane Irma. It's now a Category 4 with winds of 155 miles an hour and is roaring toward Florida. The monster storm, which has already killed at least 24 people and devastated entire islands, is not finished with the Caribbean. Cuba and the Bahamas are being battered right now, but Florida is bracing for a catastrophic direct hit. There could be storm surges of up to 12 feet along the coast, and the powerful core of the storm could hit the Keys and then the Everglades near Miami, barreling up through the entire Florida peninsula. That's prompted what may turn out to be one of the largest mass evacuations in U.S. history. Florida's governor says time is quickly running out, urging residents to leave now. Hundreds of thousands have been ordered to evacuate, and millions more they're trying to move out of harm's way, leading to clogged highways and gas shortages. Officials in South Florida warn that once the storm hits, they won't be able to help those who decide to stay behind. Georgia and South Carolina have also ordered evacuations beginning tomorrow. I'll speak with Florida's Governor Rick Scott and the Director of the National Weather Service and our correspondents, specialists and guests. They're standing by with the kind of full coverage that only CNN can deliver. The breaking news. A new forecast is just in for Hurricane Irma. Let's go straight to our meteorologist, Allison Chinchar at the CNN Severe Weather Center. Allison, what is the very latest?
So the very latest, Wolf, is that we are seeing at least a moderate increase in terms of gusts, going from 185 miles per hour up to 190 miles per hour. Sustained winds are holding steady at 155, but I want you to understand, 2 miles an hour stronger. If this was 157, that would be a Category 5. So even though we are just a Category 4 now, it is at the very top end of that Category 4 strength. You can see the storm continuing its trek in between the Bahamas and Cuba. This plays an important role because over land, the storm weakens, but it's over open water. This is where the storms like to be. This is where they can either maintain strength or get even stronger because of that warm water. We've also seen an increase. This swath of hurricane watches and warnings has expanded a little bit because we are getting closer to landfall time. And the closer and closer we get, the more these hurricane watches and warnings are going to spread further north into the state. So keep that in mind. Even if you see your county on the map and it's not under a hurricane watch or a warning as of right now, that could change as we get closer to landfall. Speaking of landfall, we expect that to be around sunrise, somewhere between overnight and sunrise Sunday morning. Again, depending on exactly where that landfall could end up being. It could be over the Keys. It could be around Key Largo. The exact point is still up in the air. However, we do know that it will end up making landfall over some portion of southern Florida and then continue the trek further off to the north. The good news is, as it pushes further north, it is expected to weaken. So the folks in northern Florida won't have to contend with quite as strong of winds as the folks in southern Florida. However, with that said, even 60, 70 miles per hour is a very high-end tropical storm. Places like Tampa, Orlando, you're still looking at, say, a Category 1 to a Category 2 strength hurricane as it makes over your particular locations. So that's going to be key. Basically, from the moment it makes landfall up until we get to, say, Daytona Beach, we still expect this storm to maintain as it makes strength, even though it will be weakening. Now, the strongest storm surge that we expect to get will be along the southern edge of the storm. We're talking, say, West Palm Beach down through Key West could see storm surge of 5 to 10 feet. Naples on the western side down towards Key West could see as much as 6 to 12 feet. Okay, here's the thing. The average first story of a building is 10 feet tall. That means you could see entire homes' first stories submerged underwater because of the potential storm surge that we'll be dealing with this storm. You also, on the western side, you may be wondering why that number is a little bit higher than that on the eastern side. It's called shoaling. The drop-off from the beach down into the deep ocean is not as deep on the western side as it is on the eastern side. That allows that water to be able to push in and go higher on the western side than it would on the eastern side. So keep that in mind, too. Forecast intensity, because of the incredible scale of this storm, how big it is, it will likely take hurricane force winds from the east side of Florida to the west side of Florida. So it really doesn't matter which side of Florida you are on, east coast versus west coast, to determine who is going to have hurricane force winds and who won't. Both sides are likely going to have that. We've also, we've heard about comparisons to Andrew. So I want to kind of break that down for you. This is Andrew on the left. This is Irma on the right. Technically, Andrew is expected to be slightly stronger at landfall, 165 miles per hour. We're expecting Irma around 150. But it's the time over the state of Florida where the big difference is. Andrew only spent 4 hours from one side of the Florida to the other. Irma is expected to spend at least 30 hours over the state. And that's going to be the big concern because that's going to allow a lot of heavy rain to fall, which could cause flooding, storm surge, not to mention hours upon hours, Wolf, of those incredibly strong winds.
Allison Chinchara, meteorologist, we'll get back to you. Don't go too far away. I know you're getting more information all the time. I want to check in with our own Brian Todd. He's in West Palm Beach, Florida, for us, where police have been going door to door telling residents to evacuate and evacuate now. Brian, what have you been seeing there?
Wolf, there is a real scramble tonight to get people out of this area. They're trying to get them off Palm Beach Island, this barrier island here to my right, to my left, your right, across these bridges. They're trying to get them over here to West Palm Beach, where we're standing, into shelters and into other higher ground.
Your mid-afternoon update shows that Hurricane Irma has strengthened some. The 2 p.m. Eastern numbers.
This street where we're on right now, telling people over the loudspeaker, door to door, evacuate now. Wolf, they are trying to avoid the devastation, the loss of life that just occurred in the Caribbean.
Entire hillsides wiped out, like this one in the British Virgin Islands. Roofs blown off, coastal buildings shredded. This devastation in the Caribbean is what Florida could be facing as soon as Saturday. In the Dominican Republic, residents look shell-shocked at the amount of destruction, with collapsed buildings, downed trees, and debris strewn everywhere. In Barbuda, one victim hid her family of 7 in a closet as their roof came off.
Every house, every infrastructure, every utility that is there is completely damaged and gone.
Coastal flooding also a problem on islands like St. Bart's. In St. Martin, where buildings are flattened, cars are overturned, and streets are blocked with debris, security forces had to be deployed to counter looting. The Bahamas and Cuba now closest to the deadly storm's path, with Florida up next. 40 million people are estimated to live in the forecast cone. Hurricane force winds stretching about as wide as the width of the state of Florida. And coastal storm surges of 5 to 10 feet are possible. It is now the final hours in Florida for residents to get ready or get out.
Attention, attention, attention. You are in a mandatory evacuation zone. Please evacuate.
Police here in West Palm Beach going door to door at this point in the final hours before the storm hits. They can't, even in a mandatory evacuation, force people from their homes. This is as close as they can come to doing that.
Mandatory evacuations now covering counties throughout the state, including more than 600,000 people in Miami-Dade alone.
Get in place now. Leave now and get to where you're going to be sheltered for the storm.
Residents around Lake Okeechobee ordered to evacuate based on revised forecasts. Even if the dike holds, there are now concerns about the massive lake's overflow.
We can see some water coming over the top as it'll slosh over the top. Which will impact the areas that we evacuated.
At Miami Airport, more than half of the day's flights were canceled. And motorists are reporting heavy congestion on some stretches of interstate, with drive time sometimes taking hours longer than normal. In Miami-Dade, over 10,000 have already gone to shelters. 5 out of 13 shelters are already full. Authorities at emergency operations centers like this one in West Palm trying to get people out or get people safe.
My biggest worry is that people will get stuck on the highway in the middle of the storm, the wrong place to be in a hurricane of this stature.
And another county official told me a short time ago they want people off the roads by tomorrow morning. Wolf, also a scramble tonight to get the elderly into safe places. We've been talking about this for the last couple of days. A county official just told me they're going to elderly people's residence now with special vehicles to try to get them out, get them to shelters, get them to more secure locations. They're continuing their communications outreach to that segment of the population. They are very, very concerned about them tonight, Wolf.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the elderly as well, and there are a lot of them down in Florida. Brian Todd in West Palm Beach, thank you. Florida officials are making a last-minute appeal to residents to evacuate or to find shelter. Joining us now on the phone, the governor of Florida, Rick Scott. Governor, thanks once again for joining us. So how should Florida residents and visitors be preparing at this last minute?
So, Wolf, you can see, if you can see the latest update, we're going to see more storm surge. People have got to understand, if you're in an evacuation zone, you should be very cautious. You should get out now, and you should get to a shelter or get to higher ground, get inland away from the storm surge. And this is a powerful storm, bigger than our state. It's going to impact both of our coasts. I care about every citizen, and we all love our families. I don't want anybody to lose their life.
When will it be too late to get out of the evacuation zones?
When the winds start, you're going to have a very difficult time there. And by the way, when those winds start and we start getting the higher winds, nobody's going to be able to save you. So if you're in an evacuation zone, you've got to get out now. I just got to the emergency operations center, just left Fort Myers an hour ago. I told the residents down there, don't get on the highways after midnight. You've made your decision. You're not going to be able to get north. We are opening up shelters all over the state. Get into these shelters if you don't have a place to go. But we can't save you once the storm starts. We can't get out there to get you once the storm starts. So do it now. Don't wait.
Well, earlier you had said that all Floridians, and there are more than 20 million people who live in Florida, should be prepared to evacuate if necessary. Do you anticipate, Governor, any further mandatory evacuations being ordered between now and landfall?
Absolutely. Here's what I think is going to continue to happen. What we just saw with the latest update is higher storm surge on the West Coast. So I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do in the Fort Myers area, but it's a little bit higher storm surge, so that might impact what they're doing. But as this travels north, and as we know what's going to happen, these communities are going to continue to do evacuations, and so we're going to see more evacuations as it goes. The storm comes up through our state, and I think you'll probably see way more on the West Coast now, because the big risk on the West Coast now is what we've been saying all along: the storm surge. It can be over your house. I mean, it's up to 12 feet high now. And here's what people don't understand about the storm surge. It flows in very rapidly. You won't have time to get away from it. It's going to come in very rapidly, and it's going to go out very rapidly. We saw this a year ago when we had a hurricane up in the Panhandle. The water comes in fast and goes out fast. It'll be too late. So if you're in an evacuation zone, go now. If they add more evacuation zones in your county, leave as soon as they happen. So be prepared right now to follow the directions of the local officials.
Important advice from the governor of Florida, Rick Scott. Governor, good luck.